Here's something I've always wanted to say on TV. F your own face. That was Elon Musk's response to European Union digital enforcer Thierry Breton's warning before Musk's interview with Donald Trump on Monday. Breton sent a letter to the tech tycoon, incredible letter, warning him against hate speech. He posted the letter on X, captioning it, quote, "With great audience comes greater responsibility. There's a risk of amplification of potentially harmful content in connection with events with major audiences around the world. I sent this letter to Elon Musk."
Breton reminded Musk of the EU's rules on promoting hate speech in the letter and said that any violations of the rules could result in further action against X. Meanwhile, Washington Post reporter Cleve Woodson asked White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre if there was anything there the White House could do about the potential spread of misinformation during the Musk and Trump conversation. This is what she said. Let's watch.
You've heard us talk about this many times from here, about the responsibilities that social media platforms have when it comes to misinformation, disinformation. Don't have anything to read out from here about specific ways that we're working on it, but we believe that they have the responsibility. These are private companies, so we're also mindful of that too. Look, it is. I think it is incredibly important to call that out as you're doing. I just don't have any specifics on what we have been doing internally as it relates to the interviews. Not something that I'm tracking, and I'm sure the president's not tracking it either.
So if you missed it, the main thing I think the EU is upset about is during a lot of the riots that were going on across the UK, he posted a fake Telegraph article onto X, or rather reposted one that Ashley S. Simpson posted, and he pointed out that they mentioned detainment camps in it. The headline was, "Keir Starmer considering building emergency detainment camps on the Falkland Islands." Of course, this is not a piece that the Telegraph ran, nor is something Keir Starmer said or has done.
Sure, but we got to be very careful here. We have a robust tradition of free speech in America that the EU, I am with Elon here, telling them to F off. And I'm not the only one saying that. I was very pleased to see, for instance, Representative Ro Khanna responded to the letter from Breton and said, "In America, we value free speech, including conversations like the one Elon Musk is having tonight with ideas and opinions people may dislike or even find offensive. We don't censor. Ironic, this used to be a European idea advocated by someone named John Stuart Mill." We're getting into very dangerous territory where some EU speech bureaucrat wants to tell Elon Musk that he ought to be careful in what him and Trump, a presidential candidate in the U.S., say during a conversation because it could be dangerous or it could be misinformation. I mean, this is starting to get into some really Orwellian territory. Similarly, so the response from Karine Jean-Pierre that we just played, that was fine. She acknowledged that the government is not really going to do anything specifically about this conversation. Thank goodness. It met the bare minimum, in my view, of what's acceptable. What was incredible was the actual question, which we didn't play, from the Washington Post reporter, where he's presuming that she's going to say something. Well, aren't you going to do something about this? Like, you're a journalist. Shouldn't you believe in press freedom, in the First Amendment, in open, unfettered dialogue, like our most fundamental cardinal belief? I guess not. Anyway, yeah, the idea that that this European Union bureaucrat would meddle in a conversation with a presidential candidate, I mean, he has no right to do that. He should have no right to do that, and it's very bad.
So, of course, the EU would not have the jurisdiction to do anything about the live streaming of this conversation in the United States.
Right.
So their letter is very likely specific to the streaming of this across the EU. And a lot of the nations that have joined in on lawsuits against X for their misuse of their users' data. He's already in hot water for that in the European Union. But there are very different restrictions on speech. In the United States, you cannot say things that present clear and present danger. It has to be, something that could start violence. In the UK, they draw the line at just anything hateful. It doesn't have to be violent or present danger.
Right.
And so there's laws against misinformation as well in the EU. And so I can imagine a world where if Musk used this platform where people are tuning in not just in the US, but also in the UK, if he started talking about the riots and asking Trump his opinion and citing false information, I think that's more so what this letter was warning about. It wasn't, we're going to take down the stream if you say anything that we determine to be hateful about migrants, for example.
I think that's exactly what he's threatening to do.
No.
And they can't have it's one stream. There's no way to make it EU compliant, nor would I think that's a good idea. I mean, you're correct that the European Union and European countries have different policies on speech that are less friendly to speech than the U.S. is. That's why there's no tech sector in Europe, because it's impossible to build anything that complies with insane European Union regulations. But they're going to have what he was implying. He wasn't very specific, but what he was implying is that if hate or misinformation start getting uttered on this stream, you have some duty to correct it or to prevent it from being disseminated, and that yes, that the remedy to that would be, well, we're not going to show it in the European Union. Musk doesn't want to have it where there's the U.S. friendly version where you hear Trump unfettered, and there's the European Union version, the version for Europeans. Again, this is an infringement on the ability for Europeans should be able to hear what Donald Trump is saying about these varying issues.
But they're not governed by the U.S. Constitution in Europe,
Robbie.
No,
I'm just saying what is morally and philosophically good would be for them to, what you're saying.
I think
it's good for authoritarian countries to stop their people from being able to hear what the American president is saying?
That sounds very American of you, Robbie, in the sense that Americans have felt it was their duty to impose their beliefs onto other nations.
I'm not imposing my beliefs. The European Union is imposing Terry Breton's beliefs on the people of Europe.
No, the people of Europe have clear laws that govern their society. And these laws involve restriction on misinformation and hate speech. And so if they determine that Elon Musk, the head of a multinational company, X is based in the United States, but they have access to it over in Europe, if they're spreading misinformation that has consequences, like saying there's detainment camps people are being sent to. This was just last week in regard to the riots in the UK. If they see someone like that sowing actual violence in their society, they might say, hey, clean up your act, or we're going to have to take some action on restricting this. That's perfectly reasonable based on their laws.
No, it's not. It's bad and wrong and evil. The response is to bad information is to call it out, explain what is wrong with it, explain how the information is inaccurate, respond to it with legitimate, correct information, to have a process to do it. Twitter actually has that process called community notes. You can community note it. So many of those posts oftentimes say, this was true of the Kamala Harris, the whole line that her crowds were faked or digitally altered, which was not true. If you look at the community notes, it's saying, actually, that's not true. More speech is the answer to bad speech, not czars deciding what you can or cannot read. That's how we get, that's how you get authoritarianism. That's how you get we're going to just trust these czars, these censors, these bureaucrats to tell us what's fake and what's not. We wouldn't trust this in any other circumstance. I don't know why we trust it just because it's Europe. Now are we showing like some favoritism toward people who look like us? Like, I don't trust the Chinese Communist Party to do this. I don't trust the governments of India or Israel or Russia or any. I wouldn't trust our own government. That's why I'm glad we have these protections.
Yeah, I think it's someone else's free will to determine within their own country and their democratic system what they want their laws to be. I'm not going to say that because I enjoy free speech in the United States, and that extends to covering hate speech, and people can say hateful things and debate about it. People can say things that are untrue and arrive at the truth through many people correcting them. But I'm not going to tell people in another country who have determined through their legal process what their laws should be, because I grew up in a different society with different cultural values, that mine should be imposed upon them.
I'm not saying it should. No one is raising the problem. We're going to invade Europe.
That's what it would be to apply U.S. standards of free speech onto the European Union.
So we can never criticize the policies of another country ever, because we just say, well, their people picked that, so that's fine. I don't. That's A. B, I know many people would argue that the policies of the European Union were not arrived at democratically by the people deciding at them, but are decided by a quasi-elected commission. This is why Britain tried to get out of it, because it seemed undemocratic to them how they come to their decision-making process. But just that starts to get to a really weird place. Okay, we can. Why would we cover news anywhere, I guess, in the rest of the world then, if we cannot say anything critical about the way they do their laws differently? I mean, that just doesn't make any sense to me.
I think if they determine that saying that the president of the country, and this is a guy running this media organization posting on his own website, if he posts on his own website, for all of his viewers, he can push it and amplify it so that everyone hears it. There's not an organic or democratic process to how information reaches people on X. That's how the corporation works. This is a billionaire who's bought access to people's brains, essentially, by putting his ideas on their feed, right? Him pushing the misinformation that their leader over in the UK is considering building detainment camps to put people in, and those people are rioting in the streets and taking violent actions against other citizens. Yes, I think it's okay in that case for the government to step in. And that's the kind of free speech that actually isn't protected in the United States because it presents a clear and present danger. And I think that's
true.
okay.
That kind of speech is absolutely protected in the United States. You absolutely can do that. False information is protected. The time, place, it's just not true.
Not determined to have a clear and present danger.
No. That's applied to imminent calls for violent action, not just that some speech might cause someone somewhere to be in danger. Okay, let me give you an example here. Let's say there's a government that under its doesn't have a First Amendment system, so the government has some, and the people voted for the people in the government to put some limits on how much information is disseminated about what is going on for the government's military conflict in the neighboring area where they were attacked, and now they're doing a retaliation against what they consider a terrorist group nearby. Would we never criticize this government for putting limits on how much information its people can get about this conflict if they democratically support this government?
I think,
to be clear, the country is Israel.
I didn't follow that at all. I don't think it's useful to make thought experiments. Rather, I think it's useful to deal with reality.
Well, okay, we've done it on the show before.
So,
we've criticized previous people occupying the left chair, and I've agreed with this criticism, have criticized, for instance, the government of Israel for censoring coverage of the atrocities going on in Gaza. And that was a criticism point the left was making that I agreed with. But now you're going to say we shouldn't do that because, well, it's their government and we don't want to... Again, I'm not imposing a will on anyone. I'm just saying that's bad. Rokan is saying it's bad.
That's why it's important to deal with reality as it exists in specific situations and judging them for that. The Israel having an assault on Gaza and committing a genocide and not allowing their citizens to see what they are doing is very similar to our criticisms of America, not allowing the United States people to receive in the press leaked documents of what our military is up to. We've talked about this a lot. We've defended Julian Assange. This specific case is a billionaire who bought a media company who has a right-wing agenda. This is one guy who has become a problem. This is not something that's really about the principles of free speech and a free press, because we don't have a free press if a corporation controls it. So my values in terms of liberty extend to corporations. It doesn't just have to be the government as a power structure doing the bad thing. Elon Musk is a guy who has bought something that was the public square and has turned it into a place where he can spread misinformation that I believe to be dangerous. People in the EU believe it to be dangerous. And this is something that's very specific to corporate media and Elon. So if the government of this other country wants to take action in that direction, I think in this scenario, yes, it's okay.
I think that is absolutely terrifying, but our viewers can decide for themselves. That does it for us today on Rising. Great having you with us again, Jessica, and we will be back for another installment of our show tomorrow.
Yes, be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while you're on the go, we're available wherever you get your podcasts.
See you tomorrow.
Bye, y'all.